What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Free Toaster News Pod. I'm your host, Carlos Caro. I'm here with Free Toaster co-founder Nick Madrid. Before we get into this week's news, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Bulldog Media Group, Fintel Connect, and Spinwheel. Nick, this week in the Free Toaster newsletter, we covered a story where Wells Fargo really knocked it out of the park with new customer acquisition. Can you talk us through what we saw there?
Yeah, thanks, guys. Yeah, talk about a storied brand. Wells Fargo reported 21.4 billion in revenue, 5.3 billion in profit. Their loans hit the 1 trillion mark, largely driven by an increase in commercial lending, which we don't as focused on. But the card business, which we are, there was a real notable shift where they opened 631 new credit card accounts, up 60% from the year before. And they also, which we'll get into, they removed co-brand from their total number. And we did some fun math and just trying to understand what's happening, and really interesting growth from them. Yeah. So what do you think when you hear that 60% increase from last year? Like, what comes to mind?
Yeah, no, it's a big number, Nick, and we're staring here at their chart. Um, the 631,000 new customers in Q1 of 26 compares to 396,000 a year prior. So the year over year comp is staggering. But if you look at their quarter by quarter, something big here changed between Q2 and Q3. So there was, again, it was about a 60% increase, and that 452,000 new customers in Q2 became 707,000 new customers in Q3. And before we talk to reasons, I just want to talk to the scale here for a second. Like we're talking in excess of 200,000 new customers on prime credit cards. 202,000 new customers on prime credit cards per month. Like these are just absolutely mind-boggling numbers. Like I talked to a lot of lenders who are happy with 5, 10, 15, 20,000 new customers per month. And many of those lenders are in like a subprime tier where it's kind of easier to book customers because there's more of them in the subprime tier. So these numbers are just enormous. And to have an organization of the scale of Wells Fargo to be able to shift gears and grow 60% quarter to quarter is just crazy to me. So we should talk about what could have driven that. Um, One could just be, I mean, you can always lean into paid channels and do more, right? You can bid up in your paid search, you can bid up in social media. So you can always just buy more traffic. The issue with that is that it takes much longer than a quarter to grow at this scale at that percentage rate. So I actually don't think that's what's going on here. It could have been something like they were sitting out in the direct mail channel, and that can be a big driver for some lenders. And then if you suddenly re-enter a big channel like direct mail where you had been dormant, that could explain something to this scale. But again, it would be unusual for a brand of this size to go from 0 to 100 in a channel like mail in 3 months. So I don't think that's it either. Um, I actually had a free toaster reader was kind enough to text me after we published Wednesday's edition, and he knows an executive that was formerly at a large Fortune 500 bank who's now operating at Wells, who apparently worked on a cross-sell program at their former issuer. And that caught my attention because if you had been sitting out cross-sell, meaning you weren't pitching your credit cards to like your deposit customers and you suddenly re-entered that market, I could see something like that explaining the scale of the jump with Wells Fargo. And then my mind went back to some of the trouble they had many years ago where they were, I believe it was their mortgage reps were cross-selling products in ways that got them in trouble with the regulators. And I think there might have even been some consent orders there. And Nick, I know you were digging into that. Is there anything you learned with regard
Yeah,
to the
yeah.
consent orders?
Before we get there, I think there are a few points that I think are interesting. One, as we look at this chart, it includes consumer and small business new credit cards. These particular numbers that they give us, we don't get that attribution. So I do think it's important that when we look at this, that we know that. And the purple bars that's our calculations. So they reported, all credit cards before. Like as an example, last year they reported 3 new million credit cards, but that included co-brand. So when we find the delta, they actually grew 2.2 million in 2025. And then when we think about this new number for Q2, which excludes co-brand of 631, if you just do a simple annualized rate, they're expected at 2.5, and I think that even underestimates their growth. So that's a few notes that I think are important. Another one before we get into the consent order, which I actually think is less interesting here, but we see the growth in the total accounts, but we don't see the growth in the purchase volume as well, right? It's relatively stable. If not, it's lower than the quarter before. So I'm curious to you, what's coming to mind when you think new accounts going up, but purchase volume isn't growing, in a linear fashion? Like, what could explain that?
Yeah, no, it's a good one. I mean, one, there's just going to be a natural lag between booking new customers and then showing up and spending a whole bunch. So I think some of this is just timing. Some of this is probably just attrition rolling off. So any bank at this scale is going to have customers closing their accounts and rolling off. So I think that could be part of it. Um, back to that theory from the toaster reader who shared, hey, this is a hypothesis. What happened? Um, that executive who joined Wells, who worked on something similar, or who may have worked on something similar at another bank, apparently did it through kind of a strategy where you would assign very low line assignments to your cross sell, get those customers on board, see how they behave, how their payment rates are, their purchase volume, etc., and then increase line slowly over time. So if you believe the theory that this is cross sell driven and it's low initial credit limits to kind of test the waters, um, with the hypothesis that they'll grow over time to the right customers, that could explain some of it too. These are just very conservative line assignments. So any of those could be the case. It's probably in practice a mix of all of them.
That makes sense. And from the consent side, I think they've largely overcome. In fact, on paper, they've largely overcome all the headwinds there. Where back in 2016, there was the fake account, scandal. Then there were some consent orders put on from OCC and from the CFPB. Then there was an asset cap that the Federal Reserve put on it, which I think was finally released mid last year. So I don't know if the asset cap has anything to do, but there is a timing thing from we see a massive jump in this chart from Q2 to Q3 in that kind of peach bar. So something structural happened there. By chance, the asset cap was released around there. I don't think that's causing it, but like it's an important point I think just to kind of understand.
Yeah, no, I would expect them to have been cautious in their reentry to cross sell, specifically cross sell that could be as aggressive as what we're seeing here with the card program. Um, I do also want to mention, Nick, because as we were digging into the reason their account volume shot up, we were at least considering the possibility that two cards they recently launched. One's called the Private Bank Visa Infinite. The other one's called the Autograph Premier. Apparently, these are products that they're cross-selling through to their high net worth bank customers. Um, could that explain this? I just it could explain maybe some of them, some of the growth, but that audience isn't big enough to kind of show up in like a mass market, like 200,000 accounts per month type of read. Maybe I could see maybe 5,000 new accounts, something like that, in a segment of that tier, but I just don't think that could explain enough of the growth. So I know we considered that, but I think we ultimately ruled it out. So Nick, before we close today, um, well, I'm excited to see you in like about a week and a half, and I know we're both going to be in New York for FinTech Week. Anything there you want to talk about that our audience might be interested in?
Yeah, so we have a number of things going on. One is a private dinner for Toaster subscribers that the Free Toaster is hosting with one of our phenomenal friends and partners, Spinwheel. So they said that you're a lender and interested in joining us, hit me or Carlos up. We have like one or two spots open. We're really trying to make it curated, so it's going to be worth your while. So we want to hear from you there. That's Monday night. There's the FinTech Summit on Tuesday, which you're going to be there. Amanda's going to be there. I'm going to be there, and all of our friends there. So that's going to be fun. I'm going to have a podcast set up there. So if anyone wants to meet me or talk, I would love that. And look, we're going to be there the whole week. So like, if we can meet, our listeners and our readers, I think we should extend the invitation. So it's an open invitation to anyone.
That's awesome. So recap: Monday, April 27th, 5:30 p.m. Private dinner. We're going to be discussing eliminating friction in marketing funnels. So if you're a credit card issuer, personal loan issuer, and you spend a lot of time agonizing over what the buttons should say and like, do you really need that page, and like, in what order do you ask your questions, things like that, we're going to be geeking out and having kind of peer-to-peer conversations on Monday night. And then Tuesday, April 28th, the Toaster Trio is going to be in New York City. Nick, Amanda, and myself will be at the Fintech event all day. So please do hit us up if you'd like to meet and discuss any potential partnerships or news stories. We'd love to hear from you all.
And we'll put the link in the bio. Yeah, so this is fun.
Cool. Well, Nick, we kept it short and sweet this week, but I think this is an interesting story to keep track of. We'll see if Wells Fargo can sustain this kind of growth.
Thanks, Carlos.
All right, see ya.